Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're completely skipping the standard intros because we need to dive right into one of the most absolutely fascinating clashes in modern history. We're looking at a monumental war of ideas, one that was waged not just against a giant empire, but from within a nation's very own fight for freedom. We're going to be exploring the incredibly complex story of Subhas Chandra Bose, the man widely known as the armed apostle of Indian independence. Let's get right into it. So, did India win its freedom peacefully? Now, globally, there's this widely accepted, almost, monolithic myth that Indian independence was achieved purely through nonviolent resistance, just protests and moral high grounds. But honestly, history is rarely that neat and simple. Today, we're going to challenge that exact narrative by exploring a completely different path to independence, one forged not through patience, but through absolute unyielding armed struggle. Let's look at the core ideological showdown of the era. On one hand, you've got Mahatma Gandhi. He's the global icon of nonviolence and moral persuasion. But on the other hand, you have Subhas Chandra Bose, the absolute champion of armed struggle and military threat. The crazy part here, both of these men wanted the exact same thing, a free and independent India. But as we'll see, they completely butted heads on how to actually get there, which set the stage for some incredible historical tension. Part 1. The birth of a radical. Let's trace his roots. Born back in 1897 to a wealthy, politically conscious family in Cuttack, Bose was an incredibly brilliant student. But the real turning point, that happened when he went to study in England. Right there, in the very heart of the British Empire, he witnessed casual racism firsthand. People just assuming Indians were naturally subordinate. And wow, this humiliation completely radicalized him. While cautious reformers back then were basically just asking for constitutional tweaks, Bose returned to India in the 1920s demanding action, immediate action, which eventually led to him being elected Congress president in 1938. By this point, his core philosophy was locked in. Freedom must be taken, not requested. He developed this absolute hatred for colonialism. He was completely done with waiting around. No more polite petitions. He firmly believed that if Indians wanted true liberation, they literally had to fight, sacrifice, and seize it with their own hands. Part 2. The Great Ideological Clash. This brings us to a massive moral tension. Gandhi was all about appealing to the oppressor's conscience, right? Using patience and nonviolence. But Bose? He was speaking directly to a whole generation of youth who were just exhausted by decades of useless petitions. He wanted immediate action, armed rebellion. I want you to really think about this for a second. Do you wait for your oppressor to suddenly find their moral compass, or do you physically force them out? Bose respected Gandhi for sure, but he thought Gandhi's methods were, basically ineffective against a giant entrenched empire. Just 2 years. That's exactly how long Bose managed to hold on to his presidency in the Indian National Congress. Even though he represented this huge, vibrant generation ready to take on the British, he was constantly clashing with Gandhi and the older Congress leaders. Bose was screaming for revolution while they wanted gradual reform. And because of this, he was actually forced out. It's kind of tragic, really. He was just too radical for the Congress, too idealistic for the British, and ultimately left totally isolated in his militant beliefs. Part 3. A desperate gamble. So what does he do? Well, in 1941, facing arrest, Bose pulls off one of the most audacious geopolitical moves of the entire 20th century. He literally escapes India, travels all the way through Afghanistan, secures backing from Germany, and then eventually partners with Japan. Why go to such extremes? Because World War II was raging. He saw the British Empire taking heavy hits and realized this was the moment. It was a fiercely pragmatic, high-stakes gamble to use India's enemies to violently overthrow British rule. He just couldn't stomach another generation of delay. But of course, this introduces some major moral ambiguity, right? If Japan won, would India actually be free or just subjugated by a brand new empire? And if Japan lost, would Bose just go down in history as a fascist collaborator? Now, to be clear, the source material emphasizes that Bose wasn't a fascist sympathizer, not at all. He was just an absolute pragmatist, a man so completely desperate for his nation's liberation that he'd ally with literally anyone who would hand him an army to fight the British. It was over in Japan that he cemented his legacy, earning the iconic title Netaji, which translates to the beloved leader. And he didn't get this title from writing political essays. He got it because he finally gave action-oriented Indians the exact thing they'd been craving, a leader who was actually willing to fight. This intense leadership led directly to the Indian National Army, or the INA. This force was formed from Indian prisoners of war that the Japanese had freed, making it the very first organized Indian military force dedicated entirely to liberation. They marched under an Indian flag and actually engaged the British military in brutal combat in Burma and Assam. We're not talking about peaceful protests anymore. This was a very real, very dangerous military threat, and it absolutely terrified the British. He lit a fire under his soldiers with a battle cry that is still legendary today: "Give me blood and I will give you freedom." This wasn't just some clever rhetoric. It was a spark that ignited a massive emotional powder keg. It unleashed this fierce spirit of rebellion that the British suddenly realized they couldn't just arrest their way out of. Young Indians were stepping up, genuinely ready to shed blood and risk the whole shebang. Part 4. How India Really Won. Now, tragically, Subhas Chandra Bose died mysteriously in 1945, officially in a plane crash. But the INA's impact after the war, it was totally explosive. Sure, they technically failed on the battlefield, but they proved without a shadow of a doubt that Indians would organize and fight. After the war, the British made this incredibly naive decision to put the captured INA soldiers on public trial for treason. And wow, did that backfire. It sparked these massive nationwide public protests. Those trials became the ultimate turning point, galvanizing millions of people to demand immediate independence. So let's pull this all together and look at the synthesis of these historical pressures. On one track, you have Gandhi applying immense moral pressure and organizing mass political movements. Simultaneously, on the other track, you have Bose's legacy creating a severe military threat and sparking all this post-war economic disruption. The reality? Indian independence finally happened because the combined weight of both these leaders, the moral push and the militant threat, made holding on to India just way too costly for the British to maintain. And the timeline here really speaks for itself. Independence was achieved within just 2 years of the INA's military campaigns and those explosive treason trials. It happened so fast right after this dual pressure climax, which perfectly cements Bose's incredibly complex, highly controversial, but absolutely crucial role in the freedom struggle. His willingness to take up arms kept the very real possibility alive that Indians could and would seize their freedom. So here's a thought to leave you with. What if Subhash, and not Gandhi, had led the main movement? Would freedom have arrived faster? Would the cost in blood have been staggeringly higher? Would India have emerged as a more militaristic nation? We'll obviously never know for sure. But understanding Bose ensures we recognize the fierce, militaristic path that wasn't taken. And it reminds us that history is never just one simple, neat little story. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep analyzing, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next one.